Airlines Can Fight Fraud with ARC and Perseuss. This is our second webinar series for fraud awareness, so we're really happy that you could join us today. I'm Judy Howard with ARC, and here with me in the room I have Cornelia Padding and I have Doug Nass, and they lead our revenue integrity team here at ARC, so they'll be able to chime in to help answer questions throughout the presentation today. But most importantly, I'm really excited to welcome our guest from Perseuss. Perseuss is a data company dealing in fraud prevention for mostly the travel industry and financial institutions. So I'm really happy to have with us Aniek Teulings, the Chief Operating Officer, and also the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, which is Maarten Alleman, and he'll be actually helping Aniek answer some of the questions today. Aniek leads the operational side of the business, and Maarten is pretty much the technical guru. So everyone will be muted on the call this afternoon. Today, wherever you may be. It's the afternoon for our guest presenters. However, you can ask questions. Everyone will be muted, but you can write them in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Aniek. Oh, and before I hand it over, Aniek might make this, it's a little slight clarification. Maarten is actually the CEO. I forgot to put the little thing, so I'm sorry about that, Maarten, but for people on the phone, he's actually the Chief Executive Officer of Perseuss. So sorry about that, Maarten. Aniek, over to you.
Thank you, Judy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I would like to tell you a little bit more about how Perseuss is helping in the travel industry to prevent fraud. Now, Judy, I can't seem to control the screen just yet in order to move to the next slide.
Okay, you should be able to just click just click your right hand.
There you go. There you go.
Sometimes little stickies. Yeah, thank you.
All right, there we go. So how we are fighting fraud together by using the combined intelligence of all merchants. So Perseuss is a global fraud database. Let me take you back to the beginning and explain how it all started. So we were founded in 2008 by a group of airlines that back in the days, they were sharing fraud data because they said, it seems like the same guys are attacking all of us. So what if we would just share that data and help each other out? So since that is not a very safe or scalable way to share data, we built a platform for them that today has grown into being the leading fraud database in the travel industry. We're official partners of IATA and ARC, meaning that throughout, all over the globe, we have the majority of airlines and travel agencies joining in this community. It is by now the standard tool for fraud prevention in the travel industry, with more than 140, I should say, airlines and travel agents joining. So not only do we share data, it is a community of fraud managers discussing with colleagues, and that is what we see so important. Fraud prevention is not something that you can do on your own behind a computer screen. You need to be in contact with other experts to learn about what is going on in the industry, to see new trends, to hear about new tactics that fraudsters are using. And this is what the community is for. In essence, and I will explain this later in more detail, the platform is serving mostly to check your new transactions for fraud. So trust, share, check. That's what it's all about. You need to trust each other and accept that there's no competition in fraud prevention. Sharing the data, sharing the chargebacks that you have encountered serves to feed the data pool, and then to check in order to check your incoming transactions for fraud. These are the three super easy steps and the pillars of our community. And of course, our mission is to enable real-time access to cross-border fraud data. And this is in stakeholders in the commercial, the payment, and the fraud industry. So in the end, we see that from a single cyber criminal to sophisticated criminal groups, fraudsters shop at multiple merchants all over the world. What does this mean? It means that these are professionals that not only target your airline, but they target several merchants all over the world. We see actually that there's a 35% overlap between merchants. This means that in the fraud industry, there's 30, or in the travel industry, there's 35% of the fraudsters that are attacking you have attacked your colleagues before. Now, how the data sharing actually works. So we have Airline A as a participant. They upload their fraud data into the tool. They feed the database. And how that database actually works in a little bit more sophisticated way than just checking one-on-one, I will explain a little bit later. But for now, let's just see how Airline A feeds the database. And then Airline B, they integrate with an API or manually to check their transactions. Now, if we see that there is a match between the transaction and the fraud that was uploaded by Airline A, we can give a notification to Airline B saying, hey, watch out, this transaction has been done, or this same person has done a transaction with Airline A and it turned out to be fraud. So be a little bit careful. So how do we actually stay ahead of these fraudsters? So this is all about global cross-vertical fraud intelligence. Let's take an example. Let's meet John. So we have certain elements of John's transaction, his name, his email, his IP address, his phone number, and his address, for example. Now, how likely is it that John is not an honest customer? We feed all this data into the database, and then the artificial intelligence algorithms, they use the confirmed fraud data that was uploaded by your colleagues. They use transactional data. Transactional data means that all the participating members in the community, they check all their transactions, also the good ones. So that means that we can use the positive data to build trustworthy profiles. So in case we see that one of your incoming transactions matches a trustworthy profile, we can say, this is a good customer, don't block them. And this will help increase conversion. Of course, this is all time-based data. That means that if an IP address was uploaded as fraudulent 10 years ago, it's very likely not fraudulent anymore. So we have the algorithms clean the data in order to make sure that you're using only a trustworthy and a very reliable source. And in doing so, of course, it combines all the data elements. So the ones that I just mentioned, for example, but there might be others as well. Now, for those of you that don't know, artificial intelligence uses decision trees. That means that, and this is just a very, very simplified version of a decision tree. It means that it combines a series of questions into defining if a transaction is fraudulent or not. These are questions that people could have probably asked as well. It is in essence the same as a rule-based systems, just that it's so much faster and bigger and more complicated. To give you an example, if I were a fraudster and my email address would be aniek@gmail.com and I commit fraud. Now next time, as I'm a smart girl, I would say, okay, now I use aniek1@gmail or aniek2@gmail.com. Now, On a rules-based system, you probably wouldn't recognize that email address as being probably part of the same profile. However, the artificial intelligence algorithms will be able to recognize patterns in the email, in the name, or in the phone number used. So in the end, we build fraud clusters, and this is what a cluster looks like. So all these dots are uploads of fraudulent transactions. So if we start at the upper left corner, no, let's start at the center. The big blue dot, that was John Smith at domain.com. That was a fraudster. Now in the transaction he did, he used the name John Smith. Actually, the name John Smith was used from another address, that's Rihakade 10. And from that address, there was another transaction used or made using a phone number. And through linking all these elements of various fraudulent transactions to each other, you can in the end say, hey, wait a minute, all these transactions belong to the same cluster. In recognizing fraudulent transactions, these clusters are key. The result of a score looks like this. You see that you get a -93. That means that it's a very high risk transaction. Then dropping down below, you see that there is an email address, a passenger name, an IP address, etc. All the elements used in the transaction, and you can exactly see why you got a 93 risk score. In this case, it's mostly because of the email address. Now in the upper right corner, and I believe that there's a clearer view over here, in the upper right corner, you can say, okay, the email address got a score 98. Why is that so? It was reported once as fraud. It was checked less than 25 times. In some cases, we see this go up to being reported 10 to 20 times as fraud. So that means that they have targeted members in the community up to 20 times. And based on that, it's very safe to say that this email address was probably fraudulent. This information is just the summary of a lot of sources that we use. If you would like to do a little bit more in-depth review of the email address, if it's a paid domain, for example, the clusters, the location of where the fraud was originating from, you can click through the system here and do a lot of in-depth review in order to base your decision. In this case, what to do, you'll probably want to block John's transaction. As I mentioned before, we check all the transactions of the majority of the airlines in the world. So that means that we know a lot of customers. At least 80% of the transactions that you check, we've seen before. And that means that we're very sure to give you a recommendation whether or not this is a trustworthy or a suspicious transaction. So let's take another example. So meet the cute lady Jackie. So let's see how likely it is that Jackie is a trustworthy customer. So what a surprise. Jackie gets a 60% or a 60 score of trustworthiness. So if we look in more detail, in this case, checking the various elements, again, it was mostly because of the email address that she got a high score. So in this case, it would prevent you from blocking a transaction, which is, as you know, so costly. So how to use Perseuss? You can either integrate the IPA directly. So let's follow the flow. So on the left we have the shopping cart of the carrier. You'll go to checkout, and from the checkout page there will be a direct API integration to our database. So we would provide you with the risk score real time. If then there is a very high risk score, your manual review time will have the chance to go through the transaction, to click through the platform, to do more investigation in the way that I just explained. But the majority of the decisions will be made real time. The thresholds for those decisions are up to you. If you say, I want no transactions to be blocked automatically, then that threshold is for you to set. Or if you say, you know what, all transactions that have a risk score between 90 and 100, I don't even want to see them, then we can automatically block them for you. So this is the first option of integration. That's the direct API integration. The second option is integrating with your payment service provider or your fraud service provider. For example, if the development capacity in your organization is a bit of a bottleneck, but you are integrated with a payment service provider, we are integrated with the majority of the PSPs worldwide. So that means that we can just go to your provider and turn on the Perseuss check. That means that all the transactions that are being processed by your provider will also be checked by us. The scoring will feed either the risk scoring of your provider, or it will display separately in the interface. And of course, there is the manual integration. Here you can do individual checks, but you can also upload batch files in order to check, for example, your day's worth of transactions. So we're reaching towards the end of this presentation, how to keep fraudster out, share your data, so you keep the AI model learning. This is essential to what our community is. In order to benefit from it, you have to contribute as well. And this is what all of our participants do. We check and we make sure that there's no, let's call it, free riders in the platform. Everybody will contribute to the platform as much as they benefit from it. This is an overview of a few of the partners that we work with. So in the upper part, we see the API partners, some of them, that will allow you to integrate through their services. And of course, there's some of the industry partners. And last but not least, the lower part, we see law enforcement partners. We have been working with the majority of these for many years. I think some of you might be familiar of the Global Airline Action Days organized by Europol that allows communication between airlines, banks, and law enforcement all over the world twice a year during a couple of days. That is a huge operation in order to not only prevent or block fraudulent transactions, but actually be more proactive and arrest the fraudsters at the airport. Now, the platform that is used during these communications or operations, called FACT, that is also built by Perseuss. So these are just a couple of examples of how we serve the community worldwide in preventing fraud, together with some of these partners.
Yeah, Nick, I just have a question for you on the previous slide. The partners that you have identified there, if the airlines have already got those solutions integrated in their risk management platforms, they can link from those platforms to the Perseuss environment, correct?
That's correct. Okay. So the way it works is that if you would have one of these partners just doing the fraud or the payment, if they process the payment, you can use us for fraud screening. So they will send our scoring through to you. And if you receive a red flag, you can log into our platform to do more research. If one of these partners is also doing the fraud prevention for you, that means that they are using, well, probably a lot of their own data, but that is coming from very often just a certain region or just their own clients. The added value that we have to those partners is that we have an overview of all the fraud data globally. So what we usually see is that they are doing a very good job in fraud prevention, but that we serve to do that extra mile and make sure that you can benefit all the fraud data globally.
Aniek, I think we have another question here for you.
Yeah,
Sure.
one came through, Aniek, and it says, can an airline upload data after it's received a chargeback?
Absolutely. That's what I meant a few slides ago. Like we actually expect our members to do that. So it's so important because this database, of course, it needs to be maintained continuously. At some point, old fraud cases or old chargebacks are not that relevant anymore. So we continuously keep feeding the database with new fraud cases that will train the algorithms more and more in order to adapt to the current fraud attacks and fraud clusters that are picking up.
Okay, great. Yeah. And just as a
You got
reminder,
more questions for me?
Oh, just as a reminder, everyone can type in questions in the control panel to the right. We are muted on the call today, but if you type those in, we have, our experts here on the phone. So just if you do that, that would be great. And we do have a couple that have come in. Is it possible to share this presentation? And I'm assuming that it is. So we will, anyone that wants that, just let me know, jhoward@arccorp.com, and I will share it. This is also being recorded, and it will be behind my ARC, where all the other airline recorded webinars are. So look for that as well. If you want to share this with anyone else in your organization, it will be there. And is there any, and here's another question that has come in, is there any timeline for data response upload from FACT to from Interpol or issuing banks? And is that clear?
I'm sorry, Judah, I didn't get the question. Can you repeat it for me, please?
Well,
yeah.
Can I?
Okay. Oh, sure, Maarten.
Yeah. So the way that the FACT application works is that we have both activities during the airline days of action, and in those days of action, the response will be within a couple of hours. But we also use the FACT tool in day-to-day, where the airlines can contact both the banks and the law enforcement agencies, but only when they indicated their availability. And when they indicate availability, it's normally, when we look at the statistics, within a couple of hours that the response is there.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's another question, and you may have answered it, but it says with the FACT tool, the timeline, like the response time for suspected cases. And you probably just said that, but if you could review that again, that would be helpful.
I believe the last time I checked, I think the average was that 75% of the requests were answered within an hour. And I think, and I would have to check these statistics, but I think up to 90% was answered within the day.
Okay, good. Thank you. And here's another question that has come in. It says, I see that the scoring doesn't include credit card data. Is that something you can help us understand and why it doesn't?
Absolutely. Good question. So our data source is mainly confirmed fraud data. If we would include credit card information there, it's very likely that their credit card is actually blocked already because it was used fraudulently. So chances that you will get a hit of, for a new transaction, include having credit card details, and there will be a hit on old credit card information in the system, the likeliness is virtually zero because the card has been blocked. And that is why card details are not that relevant in our way of fraud prevention.
Okay, great. I think we may have some more questions coming in, but people look like they're typing. So
Good.
Anything else, Maarten or Aniek, you want to add from the presentation today as we are waiting for a couple more questions to come in?
Not for now. For me, I can just continue talking, explain a little bit more, and then I'll just hear when there's more questions.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right, so the slide that we've been looking on for a little while now explains where the current community is located. So the orange countries have members, and that means that there is fraud data being uploaded from all these locations. The current database holds about 90 or 29 million negative data elements, so that's fraudulent data elements, and 3.2 billion positive data elements. We process 200 million transactions annually, and over 10,000 new fraud uploads are done weekly. So as you can see, the database is continuously growing. So one of the new initiatives that I'm very excited to talk about today is the ARC risk check. So we partnered with ARC because we saw that there is a very big part of the travel community that is not being serviced today. And these are the smaller travel agents. As airlines or carriers, you know that your tickets are being sold by various entities, amongst them the smaller agents. And where the bigger airlines, they have the resources to have in place very advanced fraud prevention, the smaller agents don't. There's currently no system or no tool in the market that they can use in order to protect themselves. So that's why ARC and Perseuss, we bundled our strength and we created the ARC risk check. This is a simplified version of the Perseuss system that allows smaller agents to check incoming transactions against the massive Perseuss database. We return a simplified risk scoring that will allow people that don't have much experience in fraud prevention to determine whether or not to block a transaction. So why am I telling you?
Aniek, just 1 second. Sorry, there's a question that came in, and it's really directed to ARC, but I think I can answer it to support where you're going as well. So the question is, if any specific agents, staff doing fraud, ARC process for recovery, ADM, etc. I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'm going to try and answer it. ARC does have a team that looks at fraud, especially card fraud, and we look for cash spikes related to agents' transactions. And it's from this environment and this data. So if you're a travel agent with ARC accreditation, and we see fraud in the system, especially card not present fraud, we send out an ARC fraud alert to that agent. And it's that data that we've collected over time that has shown that the small to mid-sized agents have got quite a bit of exposure. About 52% of our alerts go to that grouping of agents daily. So hence us working with Perseuss to bring forward the solution that Aniek is talking about now. And I hope that has answered the question posted there as well. Thank you, Aniek. Back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that relates very well to the current slide. I think, why is this interesting to you? Well, the more fraud you upload, the better we have this global database updated, and the better we can help those smaller travel agents in preventing fraud, which in the end circles back to you, leading you to experience less fraud. A second way this can be interesting to you is that if you currently have travel agents that negatively impact your operations, you can introduce them to the ARC risk check, encourage them to use it, and thereby protecting yourselves. So in the end, this will lead you to save money through less chargebacks, less false positives, and save time, of course, because you'll have less flagged transactions. You will know better which ones are risky, which ones to review, and it will go a lot faster because we have gathered all the relevant information. If we are even linking through, and I didn't have the chance to show you that now, but we are linking through to external data sources as well. For example, you can go to Google, Facebook, Twitter, white pages, several of these external providers. So this will really help you save time in your manual review as well. So next steps, in case you are interested, of course, at the end of this presentation, we'll share our contact information. So you can reach out to either us or to ARC and sign up for a 1-month free trial, during which we will find out how much the return on investment could be for you. Because we want, of course, our members to really benefit. So we will see how much of the fraud that you encountered we could have prevented. And we will give you access to the platform so that your analysts can really use the platform and see if it's working with the current work processes that you have in place. You can become a member of the growing community, so really talk to other fraud analysts and experts all over the world. And in doing so, fighting fraud together to reduce your costs. And that's it. That's the end of it. So that's our contact information. Judy will probably distribute this information. And that was the end of the presentation. I'm hoping there's more questions for us.
I think there's one that parlays onto what Cornelius was answering before. Cornelius, is that correct? I'm not sure. This one, is the airline notified with such alerts?
Yeah. So thanks, Judy. I can take that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Is the airline notified for the ARC alerts sent to the agents? No, we do not alert the airlines of that because the agent needs to be given an opportunity to review the data that we've sent them and confirm that it is fraud. So it's not the way we look at it is that we suspect this to be fraud. Please validate and confirm back to us that it was fraud. And of course, we do it within the 24-hour void window. And in most instances, and according to our data, we see that a lot of the alerts that we send out, the agent has voided the transaction before it actually comes downstream to you. And this feeds into the solution that we're bringing with Perseuss, the ARC check, is that front end, we want to do that front end prevention so that it never ever comes into the value chain or the distribution channel for the airline. So you won't need to do a debit memo downstream because the idea is to prevent that from coming into the system at the source, at the origin. And of course, you know that the agent is not necessarily the one committing the fraud, is fraud being committed against the agent because they just the avenue in to the system. So and that's the whole purpose for the ARC check solution as well. So again, the more data we have in the system, the better people are able to make decisions based on that data. And this speaks to our kickoff webinar of earlier this month, September 1st, where we spoke a lot as ARC about collaboration with the airlines and sharing information, etc. So it all ties in together there. I hope I answered that question.
Great. Again, we are on the phone here. We do have some. Oh.
Sorry, Judy, to interrupt
right
you.
ahead.
I say there's a second question that ties into the same. We do send out alerts to airlines as well. We have a team that looks at transactions coming in the settlement environment, ARC settlement environment, and if we identify something of concern to us, we try and send that information over to you as quickly as possible, and we rely heavily on the airline's response to that information so that we can, again, take action and inform the agent or work with the agent to resolve that issue. And that's pretty much more, there's more information on our webinar that we did on September 5th, and that will be live as well on our Behind My ARC for the airlines to review what it is we do specifically in that environment and how that message is shared and where we are moving to in the future state as ARC as a whole when it comes to those sort of incidences. Okay.
Great, thanks, Cornelius. Here's a question I don't think we answered. Is the analysis for the analysis for the customer, is that done live while the agent is issuing the ticket, and are the results shown immediately?
So the moment that we decide to start a trial and we are doing the ROI analysis, the way it works is that it's kind of a dovetailed approach. One is real time. It will allow the airline to do checks in the system for incoming transactions and see if there's hits in the platform. However, you're not always sure if what you're if the transactions that you're accepting, if they turn out to be fraudulent or not. You will need at least a 3 to 6 month time frame to allow transactions to be reported as chargebacks. So the only way to do a really solid analysis is on the data that is a little bit older. That is why we usually take data that's about half a year old, and we see, okay, let's take a look at the transactions of the month of January. We see what transactions have scored really high in our platform that we would have flagged as fraud, and you know which ones you have accepted and indeed have come back as fraud. So in that way, it's very easy for us to analyze how much fraud could be prevented. In the same way, we see, hey, these are the transactions that you blocked, but we know that this was a very good customer because they have done several transactions with your competitors. So we could also explain how much false positives or false rejections you had, and therefore how you could have increased your revenue there. So combining all this data, we are pretty confident about the return on investment that we could give you.
And just to add to that, all the transactions that you check in real time will give a direct response as well. So when you do a check through our API, within 100 milliseconds, you get a response, and that response can be used to decide whether to issue the ticket or not.
Okay, great. And there's another question that's come in. This is a bit of an interesting one. Has law enforcement used this data to disrupt any crime ring?
So the data that we have in the Perseuss database is used by us to identify the larger fraud rings. That's one of the most important things that we do with this data. And when we see a fraud ring that's growing and is hurting a lot of the airlines that are using the Perseuss data, we will reach out to the airlines and ask them to help us and go with us to Europol so they can investigate the actual fraud ring and decide to take action. So yes, our data is actively used by Europol and Interpol and the Secret Service, but only with the consent of the airline. So we will never send data out to law enforcement without the consent of the airline.
Okay, that's great. Again, I encourage anyone to send in any other questions. It looks like we just had one that popped in. Any process apart from the GAAP to catch fraudsters or passenger traveled tickets based on chargebacks?
Yes, that's the basically the process that I just described. So our system is actively monitoring for new fraud rings, and when such a fraud ring is big enough, we will take action together with the airlines that use Perseuss and contact law enforcement to take action.
Hey, Maarten, this is Doug. I just wanted to follow up with that. We use the platform for that purpose as well. And in fact, just yesterday we had a press release that ARC will be putting out about how using data from the Perseuss tool, we did use it internally to go after a fraud ring operating out of New York City. And they just had, just yesterday, they pushed out the Department of Justice put out a press release about 7 convictions for a fraud ring operating here in the U.S. So the tool, as a community tool, it's been very valuable for our own fraud investigations over here in the U.S.
And also, just to add to that, is that we actively load data to the Perseuss site on fraud that we see on our card not present environment into the Perseuss environment. We've been doing that for the last 8 months now. So we're contributing to the community there.
Good. Thank you, Cornelius and Doug. It appears that there's no more questions at the time, but we still are I'll just kind of do some housekeeping things while we wait to see if any other questions come in. In addition to Maarten and Aniek's contact information, if anyone is interested in this tool or more information in regards to anything that you've heard here today, you can contact Cornelius or Doug, and I will, if you have a pen and a pencil or piece of paper, I'm going to provide you their contact information, which Cornelius is C. Hatting, H-A-T as in Tom, so there's 2 T's, Hattingh at arccorp.com. Doug's is D. Nass, N is in Nancy, A-S-S, that's Sam, at arccorp.com. We encourage you to contact them again, once you leave this call. If you want to reach out to Aniek or Maarten or Cornelius or Doug, they'll be happy to help with any information shared here today. We encourage you to do that. Also, just to reiterate, ARC's fraud hotline, 855-358-0393. That is open 24/7, and you can call in, and anything that you want to ask our revenue integrity team about in regards to any concerns about fraud or risk, please use that number or email us at stopfraud@arccorp.com.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. Just sorry to interrupt you
No,
there.
you're good.
I just want to add as well there that stopfraud.arc.com email. If you've detected fraud as an airline on your side, please send that through to us. We need that data. We use that data, and we value that data because we will use it to look after. We've got 240 airlines signed up with ARC, and we will look to see if any of that has happened anywhere else. So please share any fraud data that you have with us, with Perseuss. We use that data. We value it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cornelius. I have a few other little things I want to say, but I just want to make sure, Aniek, Maarten, anything else that you folks would like to add?
Not for my part. No,
Okay.
I'm all set. I would like to take the opportunity to thank you, ARC, for a really great cooperation and for the chance to present here and to explain what we are doing with the community, and to encourage everybody to ask more questions or reach out to us after the webinar. Thank you.
Great.
And
Great.
thank you to you guys both for presenting and working with us and bringing solutions to the agency community and the airlines.
Yeah, and for taking the time to be on our webinar today. For everyone on the phone, they are calling from Europe, so they are kind of getting late in the day there, so we really appreciate them taking the time to be with us. Before we do hang up, though, we do have a really another interesting webinar tomorrow that's a continuation in our webinar fraud series, fraud awareness series, which is trends in loyalty fraud, what you should know. So that's an interesting one. If you haven't signed up for it, you can go to our arccorp.com under events and you can sign up there. Or if anyone has questions, jhoward@arccorp.com, that's me, and I can send you a link to register. We have 2 more sessions for you coming up on September 25th and 26th. Those will also be listed in our events area. Look for emails as well that advertise those, but we want to have you attend and hope you can, because these are really informative. They're to help you. ARC is there as a partner, along with such folks as our Perseuss friends on the phone today. So thank you, everyone, and look forward to joining us tomorrow or on the future ones. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Cornelius, and thanks, Aniek and Maarten.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.